for 2 years. I was abused. I had my life stolen from me by a woman who thought it was hers for the taking. She told me she loved me, and I believed her. She told me she'd give me the world, but instead, she made me not want to be a part of it anymore. And I'm telling you this because I'm telling my story for all the other women, for all the women who will come after me, for all the women who will find themselves trapped with her, or for any other woman who finds herself trapped by a person they don't recognize anymore, a person they thought they loved. To all those women, I want to tell you, I want to say, you need to know that you are not alone. Please know that you are not alone. And I know it feels like it, I know that. I know it feels like that sometimes you just can't keep going. But you need to know that you can leave. You don't have to stay. You don't have to keep doing what you're doing over and over and over anymore. You don't have to stay at all. And even though it may feel impossible, even though it may feel as though killing yourself is the only safe way out, please believe me when I say it's not. Please believe me when I tell you that you can do this, because you can leave, and you will be okay. You will be okay. She was a narcissist, my ex-girlfriend. And that's what they do. They make you feel as though your life is not worth living without them. But it is unbearable with them. That's what I lived with. And I don't talk much about it because, well, there's the cliche, the eye roll you get when you start talking about abuse. Or some idiot that thinks I'm just the bitter ex. And I know I'm just another one in a long line of other ones. I know I'm just the next one on a list. Because they pick people like me and you. They seek us out. People who are sensitive, nice, kind, or vulnerable in some way. They prey on us. Tell us stories about how awful their lives have been, how terrible their ex-partners were, and how badly they were treated by them. So when I do tell people, when I do talk about it, I find people don't really know what a narcissist is, what it means to be a narcissist. People seem to think it's this self-obsessed delusions of grandeur way of being, but it's not. It's worse than that. It's like being suffocated, only you're letting it happen. Because you just don't have the energy left anymore to fight. And you think it might be better just to let it happen, just to let yourself go. It's like having your life stolen from you, but you didn't even realize it was disappearing until you have nothing left, not even your own sense of self. Even reality doesn't exist in the way you always once thought it did. That's the worst bit. It was for me, anyway. I thought I was losing my mind. I would listen to her make up lies about everything. Tiny little things that wouldn't make any sense. She would lie to people about what I did for a living. She would tell people I was a lot more successful than I was. Or she would take me to parties. I hated parties. I hated people. Her sort of people. And because she didn't want me to speak to anyone, because she wanted to be the centre of attention, she told people I was deaf. I know. It sounds ridiculous. That's why I second-guessed myself. That's why I thought, what she said must be true. I must be losing my mind. Because over and over and over again, she would tell these stories to me or to other people while I was there listening. And she would tell them in such a convincing way that gradually I just assumed it was me. There was something wrong with me. So she took me to the doctors. Dr. Smith, who she made a point of telling me was far hotter than I could ever be. I sat in the office and Dr. Smith looked into my eyes, weighed me, took my blood pressure. She asked me how I was feeling. My girlfriend told her that I wasn't myself, that I seemed withdrawn, that I wasn't interested in food or sex, that I seemed mentally unstable. And she said what she always said when I was sad. She told the doctor, I don't think I can handle being with someone who is mentally unstable. So she had to do something. Because, of course, she loved me, and she hated seeing me this way. So, Dr. Smith prescribed me antidepressants, even though I said I didn't want to take them. I would have gone to therapy, but I wasn't allowed. My girlfriend wouldn't let me. I'd been seeing one just before we got together, but she soon put a stop to that. She told me that if I was unstable enough to see a therapist, then we couldn't be together. So I stopped. I wasn't allowed to see them. My family. Before we were together, I used to see my mum every week. We would meet up in town and have breakfast at a little tea shop, Mrs. Piper's it was called. We would have a pot of tea between the two of us, order 2 different slices of cake, cut them in half, and have half each. We would talk about everything, anything. But then I met her, my girlfriend, and she would complain that I was too close to my mum, that we spent too much time together, and that it was all a bit weird. She made me feel like it was something unnatural, that I had to stop doing it to keep a peace in my relationship. And because I was under her control, I did. I made my excuses every week. Said I couldn't meet her, said I was too busy. And gradually, my mum stopped asking. It happened with my children too. They're 5 and 7. My son, the younger one, he was so close to me. We would always hold hands and cuddle, and he came to sleep in my bed most nights. She was jealous of him. She wouldn't hold my hand if he was holding my other hand. She would walk ahead and refuse to speak to me. She told me I was disgusting for letting him sleep in the same bed as me. She told me that if social services got wind of it, I'd be arrested or I'd have them taken away from me. Then I started losing my friends too. One by one, they'd stop calling, stop messaging on Facebook. She didn't like me seeing them anyway. She kept telling me that I should always put her first, that she should always be the top of my list, above my friends, above my family, above my children. She knew the passcode to my phone. She made me change all of my passwords to one which she said was better, much safer. Sometimes she would ask to see my phone. She would take it from me, read my Facebook messages, and then she would punish me if someone had messaged me, if someone had said they missed me. That's how I proved that she could trust me. Because of course she had been so hurt by people in the past, that's what she said. She told me her last girlfriend had cheated on her so many times, and she'd caught them in bed together, like an episode of EastEnders. And the girlfriend before that, Rachel, who tried to kill herself, just to get back at her, just to manipulate and bully her into doing what she wanted to do, because she was so emotionally unstable. And that's why my girlfriend was so scared, so traumatized. That's why she was so worried that I would go the same way. So she had to keep an eye on me. She had to check that I was okay. But it was only because she cared, only because she loved me. I didn't realize then. The reason Rachel was emotionally unstable was because she was living with a narcissist. Because she just couldn't bear her life anymore. There was nothing left to live for. Instead, I felt sorry for my girlfriend, for having to go through all these relationships with people who treated her so badly. And I tried to show her not everyone is like that. I wasn't like that. She took me to bingo once. I hated every moment of it. She said we wouldn't go to the main bingo hall in town because that's where she worked, Rachel, and that Rachel had banned her from going there. So we went to the other one on the outskirts of town. We sat at a sticky top table and ate soggy, greasy chips and drank pints of warm beer. I won £150, which would have helped. I thought of all the food I could buy or things that I needed to get for the children, like new school shoes, food for the packed lunch. But when we went up to the counter to claim the prize money, the woman at the desk passed the money to me, and my girlfriend held her hand out, grinning at me, just standing there, holding her hand out, waiting for me to give her the money that I just won. So I gave it to her. And she turned to the woman at the counter and said, "I've trained her well." And she had. That's exactly what she'd done. But I didn't see it then. And still I didn't leave. I stayed with her, convinced that she was just hurt from all the other times with all the other women. That I could help her, heal her. That maybe she wasn't actually that bad. That's the worst thing. When people ask, "Why did you stay?" Because they don't get it. They don't get the reason you stay. The reason you stay is fear. Absolute fear. Fear of what might happen if you leave. What she will do to you, your family, your friends. And fear of who you will find you have become if you do leave. I was scared of her. More than scared. And I was scared that my life would be destroyed if I left. Because I was convinced that she would do everything in her power to do just that. I'd heard her threaten it about her ex, about other people. She'd said to her sister one day, when we were standing in the kitchen, she'd said about her ex, "I know how to play the long game. I'll ruin her in the end." Sometimes I still hear that in my head, even now. It's hard to talk about what happened in that time. It's hard to say it out loud. I didn't notice it in the beginning. Everything we did was her idea. Everything was done on her terms. I suppose that should have been a sign. Now that I look back on it. I was gaslit. That's another one of those terms that a lot of people don't really get, and I didn't really know it. Didn't know it at all, actually, until a friend pointed it out to me. And even then I didn't believe her. I had to Google it one night when I was on my own. She was out with someone. Georgie, I think her name was. Another one of her women that she was sleeping with behind my back, that she thought I didn't know about. It said, and I remember it because I knew it made sense, even though I couldn't believe it. It said, gaslighting refers to a specific type of manipulation where the manipulator is trying to get someone else to question their own reality, memory, sanity, intuition, or judgment. And I hated myself for believing the cliche that she might get better. That it might just be coincidence that all these psychological terms like gaslighting and manipulation and narcissism kept making so much sense. So I carried on living that life. And she carried on changing situations, lying about things that had happened, events, or things I or we had said or done. And her friends and co-workers and strangers we met believed every single word. And I would keep telling myself that the red flags and the little voice inside my head telling me that I was in danger were wrong. And I would believe what she said was true. Because she was in a position of power. People believed her, people respected her, so why wouldn't I trust her? That's how she ended up making me clean and tidy our house every day. She told her mum that I was so good at tidying, so good at looking after the house while she was at work. She made a list of all the things that I did to her mum, all the things that were helpful, and I stood right next to her while she listed them. And I knew I didn't do any of those things. I didn't live with her. I had my own house, my own home. But she wouldn't let me call it that. I had to call her house home. I had to call the house where I lived with my children the other house. And if I slipped up, she would punish me. She would say things like, "Oh, so that's how you really feel, is it? Then why don't you go back to live in your real home then, huh?" So I did my best to prove to her that I thought of her home as a home too. I did my best to convince myself of that. She wrote me job lists every single day. It had all the things that she told her mum I did on. Here, I'll show you one. Number 1. Give both fridges, little one in the garage and kitchen one, a good clean and defrost. Make sure you use antibacterial spray on both. Number 2, throw out all of the out-of-date food. Number 3, find and put all of the iPads and other electronics on charge. Number 4, change all of the bed sheets in my room and the children's rooms and make up all 3 beds. Number 5, deep clean and tidy the whole house, hoover, dust, polish, sweep, bleach. Number 6, wash and hang out all of the rugs, make sure they are dry and put back down before I get home. Number 7, clear the entrance to the garage fridge side a little and pick up the dog shit in the garden. Walk the dogs too. Number 8, make sure dinner is cooked by the time I get home. Number 9, tidy up all of the kids' shit and make sure the whole house and garden are spotless. Number 10, do the laundry, dry the laundry, fold and put it all away and do the washing up. I don't want to see any plates out drying when I get home from work, so make sure that they are all put away. But that's not even half of it. That's not even the tip of the iceberg. Sometimes there would be other things like fixing things, putting up new curtains, or running errands to pick up medication for her. I didn't mind the gardening. But the things I found worst of all, the things I found the most horrific, the most degrading, was walking into her house in the mornings after dropping my children off at school and finding she hadn't asked her children to take their breakfast bowls through to the kitchen from a dining room. She hadn't asked them to tidy up or put any of their toys away. More often than not, the entire box of Lego would be appended all over the room. Cereal bowls with drying cereal would be left on the table with milk sloshed over the edge onto the tablecloth. The milk and juice bottle lids would be off halfway across the room. There would be food on the floor. Their beds would be a tip, paper and pens everywhere, and their beds unmade with toothpaste spatting globs all over the sink in the bathroom. Her bedroom wasn't any better. She would take clothes out of the closet to try on in the morning, and if she chose not to wear it, she wouldn't put it back in the cupboard. She would toss it onto the bed or the floor for me to tidy up. She would never make her bed, and would leave makeup strewn across the dresser. In the evenings, when we were in bed, she would make me bring her snacks, like curly-whirly chocolate bars. I remember once, she held the wrapper up over the edge of the bed, looked at me lying beside her, and said, "You'll get this in the morning." And she dropped the wrapper onto the floor, despite the fact that there was a bin less than 6 foot away, because she thought it was funny. That's the sort of thing she would do, to put me in my place. I used to write. I was a writer. That's what I did. I wrote poetry and fiction. I wrote stories about the world inside my head. But that dried up. In the time that I spent with her, I stopped writing, I stopped drawing, I stopped reading and doing all of the things that I love to do because I didn't have the time. But worse than not having something as simple as the time, I didn't have the inclination either. After a while, I no longer heard the characters clamoring with excitement inside my head. I no longer heard their stories. It was just cold, silent, still. I couldn't write because I didn't have time, and I couldn't draw because my hands shook. I wasn't earning any money. I ran out of money. I ran out of time. She bullied me. She humiliated me. She belittled me in private and in front of anyone, everyone. And if you know how that feels, I am so sorry. I'm so, so sorry. If you know how it feels to be taken down in front of people you barely know, or worse, in front of your own friends and family, to have things said about you which aren't even true in front of you and behind your back, but you can't do anything about it because you don't trust your own mind anymore. I'm sorry. She raped me. But how do you prove that? People are often surprised. Even doctors, even Dr. Bloody Smith, medical professionals seem suspicious or doubtful when they hear of a woman raping another woman. How could sex between two women be violent enough to cause physical or mental pain or injury? How was it rape? Even if sometimes I never said no. Because I didn't say yes. Once we went to Felixstowe. It's on the coast, a little town. We sat there on the beach eating a picnic that I had made us, and we borrowed a paddleboard from our friend Kelly. She made my son get on it. He's scared of water. Always has been, since he was little. I remember taking him on holiday to a caravan park. He was only tiny, maybe 2. I tried taking him into the swimming pool, but the second the water touched his feet, he screamed and he wouldn't go in. He panicked. So I didn't make him. He's always been funny about water ever since. So he never learned to swim. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe if I had, this wouldn't have happened. So maybe she was right. Maybe she had been right all along. It was all my fault. I should have taught him how to swim. Or taken him to swimming lessons. Then he would have been a fish. Just like her 2 children. They're like fish, she used to say to everyone near us on the beach, whenever we would go, boasting so much that you could see them cringe. But she would never see that. Anyway, she bullied him into going on the board. Told him he was a big baby, he was a wuss. And I'll never forget his expression. Like he knew. He knew that if he didn't, his mother would get punished. So he sat on it. Even though I said, you don't have to, I told him that. But he knew anyway. So he went on it. I went on with him, just to be sure he would be okay. Even though I was there, it wasn't okay. Because I wasn't strong enough to say no. I couldn't even stick up for my own children when they needed me the most. And then, somehow the board tipped, and he fell off. Just slipped right into the North Sea. The water was cold. And you know how it is, you can't see. It's grey and brown and cold and strong. I went in after him. I could feel the board on top of me, bumping up and down on the top of my head. I couldn't see, I couldn't touch the bottom. I was screaming his name under the water. I was reaching out for him, throwing my arms around under the water to try to find him, to try and grab hold of anything at all. It seemed too long. But then I touched something. I grabbed him. I pulled him up, the weight of him pushing me back down, and I pushed him out towards the sky, and he was breathing. Somehow, I got him to the shore, out of that fucking sea. He was blinking and gasping like he didn't know what had happened or who he was, and when I said his name and held him against me, he wouldn't or couldn't say a word. My daughter just sat staring at us, terrified. You know how you see in the news, children dying a day later from drowning, delayed drowning, whatever they call it? I was terrified that would happen. That I would wake up tomorrow morning and he would be dead. I wanted to take him to a hospital or a doctor, but she wouldn't let me. She was the driver, and I was trapped there with nowhere to go. Instead, I had to spend the whole day sitting on the beach, cradling my terrified child, thinking that my little boy was going to die. I emailed the police. My therapist said she felt like I was strong enough to. I've been seeing her for about 8 months. So I did. I wrote an email to them, and I put everything in it. Everything she did to me. I had to go to a special building and be interviewed on video. I had to sit in a room on a sofa, like a pretend sitting room, and I had to tell this policewoman everything that had happened. I had to go into graphic detail about the rape, about my son nearly drowning, about the weeks and months of abuse. What I didn't tell them was that I would have killed her if I could. I would kill her. Given the chance, if I didn't have my children, I would kill her. That's what she did to me. I wanted her dead. Then finally, she would be able to see how I felt, how she made every woman to ever end up in her bed feel. They were perfectly nice, the police. Told me they'd support me, told me there were resources available for that. But they don't tell you. They don't warn you that when you tell them, you're going to have to tell them everything. And the detail going through that is, I told them though. I'd been speaking to her ex, the one before me. We had swapped stories. I'd spoken to her just before I emailed the police, and we had so many similarities. She had taken us both to the same clothes shops because we had to wear what she wanted us to wear, what she thought was appropriate or presentable. We were both taken to the same hairdressers. A girl she used to teach called Amy, she worked in Ipswich. I was taken there one night after I was told my hair was brassy, and she made me feel ugly. More ugly than I already felt. She forced me into having my hair cut because she bullied me into it. Then she took me to the doctors again, just like she had her ex. And we started acting a bit funny, a bit unstable. She said at first that I wasn't remembering things right, or that I was daydreaming too much. And I don't know. Maybe I was daydreaming more, and I wasn't feeling right. I lost so much weight, no matter how much I ate. One day I went to the bakery in town, bought a box of 4 jam donuts and I ate them all. Didn't even taste them. I tried to put on weight, but it didn't happen. It would not happen. Instead, my hair carried on falling out in handfuls. I lost 2 stone, and my boobs were flat and ugly, she said. And she didn't want to be with a piece of paper, she said. And my jeans wouldn't stay up no matter how tight I did my belt up. I was sick. Sick in the head, she told me. And I believed her. So she took me back to Dr. Smith. She said I was unstable again. And she wasn't sure if she could be with someone who was unstable again. And on the way to the doctor's, she told me how much she wanted to be between Dr. Smith's legs. How she wished she was free to fuck her. Because of course, Dr. Smith fancied her too, she was sure of it. And if I wasn't careful, if I didn't sort myself out and stop being mental, she would leave me for her. So I sat there again and looked at Dr. Smith with her neat, brushed, bleached blonde hair and neat plucked eyebrows and her highlighted cheekbones and her plain, smart, expensive-looking clothes. And I looked down at the split ends of my hair against the blue top I was wearing with the hole in one side, and my ripped jeans with a stain on the knee, done up with a brown leather belt with a crack in one side, and my shoes with the worn-out soles. And Dr. Smith looked into my eyes, just like she did before. But this time I saw more in hers than she would ever see in mine. She took my measurements and checked me over. She asked me how I was, and I didn't even try to speak. My girlfriend answered for me. I was put on more antidepressants, stronger ones this time. And she asked for some diazepam to keep me calm if she needed to calm me down. But when we got home, and I asked for one, a diazepam, she told me they weren't for me at all. She had taken so many that the doctors wouldn't prescribe them to her anymore. So they were for her. And she kept them. They were just for her. She cheated on me too. Several times, more than once. More than I know, with 3 women that I knew of, anyway. There were probably more. There was one, Sarah, who right from the very beginning we were kept apart, never allowed to meet or talk, or... There were other women too. She'd hide her phone from me, tilt the screen away so I couldn't catch a glimpse of a name or a message. Once I managed to look through her phone. We were at the beach, and I went back to get something to the car, and I saw her phone on the seat, and I looked at it. It was all there. Messages from Sarah dated way back to when she was with her ex-girlfriend. Graphic messages of sex. Then there were the messages about us. The messages about me. It made me feel as though the inside of me was on fire when I read them. As though I had been set alight. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think or speak. I didn't have time to read them all, but I saw enough. Declarations of undying love. And there were so many lies about me, about her life. And what shocked me the most was that she lied about things just to make me out to be a bad partner, a bad person. She made me out to be this monster, this person she could barely stand to be around, who didn't buy her enough gifts, didn't put her first or make her the top of their list. She told her that I never did anything around the house, that I was lazy. She told her that she had to do everything. Tidy, clean, everything. She told her about my unnatural bond with my own child. Once, in the very beginning, she told me she was allergic to bee stings. And she told me this story. She said, once I was stung by a bee and it swelled up so much that I had to go to hospital. And they had to draw a line around the bit where I was stung in blue pen to track how much it was spreading. How awful, I thought. But then, months later, her friend Russell came over for dinner, which I cooked, begrudgingly. After an argument we had had over me being late to our house because I was busy caring for my children when I should have been caring for her, Russell came and he could see that I had been crying, but he dutifully ignored it because he was her friend, not mine, and he knew his place. We were talking about summer or bees, perhaps, I don't remember. But I do remember how he stood in the doorway to the kitchen and he told me that exact story she had told me. But in this version, it happened to him. He was the one in hospital, with a blue pen drawn around the sting. That's one of the first times it happened. One of the first times I realised that despite the fact that she was constantly talking and talking about how honesty was what she thrived on, how honesty was the most important thing to her, that she never ever lied, despite all that, she was lying all the time. All the time. Everything was a lie. And I realised it then, all at once. All at fucking once. I realised who she was. I realised that she, the very being of her, was a lie. The people she called her friends were nothing but people under her control. Her family hated her. People hated her, they tolerated her, but they didn't love her. She was a lie. And gradually, I noticed more and more things. Over and over again, I noticed the inconsistencies of her stories that added up to be someone else's entirely. And the scary part was that she believed these stories. Absolutely, she truly believed that this was who she was, and that people believed her. She doesn't see how everyone sees through her lies. I took the antidepressants only for a week or so this time, but they made me feel so sick and dizzy, and I didn't want to be on them. So I stopped taking them, and I lied. I told her I was still taking them, and she believed me. Or at least I thought she had believed me. But later, ages after, when she was long gone and out of my life, I called the doctors, a routine call, a medication review, with my new doctor. And I discovered that the tablets had been picked up on my behalf. And I realised that she had been giving me the tablets in secret, crushed them into my food or drink when I wasn't looking, and kept me on them. Kept me feeling worse than I already did. And I know she will tell so many people the same story she told me about her ex, but she will tell them about me instead. She will cry and tell them all how she is the victim. She will tell them how I reacted, but she won't tell them what she did to cause that reaction. I was scared. I was lonely. I lived in the fight or flight response, always ready to apologise, to make something better, or diffuse a situation by immediate defeat. I had become a non-person. I was afraid to reach out for help for the same reason I was afraid to leave. Because I was terrified of the consequences. I was no longer the woman I was before. You could see it. Everyone could see it, except me. The way she screwed herself into me, bit by bit, burrowing under my skin into my flesh, into every single bit of me, until I was possessed by this woman who would pick me up like a puppet when she wanted me, and throw me aside to exist as nothing but a shell the next. And the awful thing is, maybe the worst thing, is that when she was pulled out of me, when I ripped her out of me, there was this hole, this wound. But I didn't miss her. I felt relieved. In fact, I didn't feel much at all because she had taught me not to feel. But I could feel the slow rotting of it. The gaping, flapping of my flesh around that hole, and the cold air that would rush in to fill that space that she had left. Like a cork plucked from a bottle. I was suddenly vulnerable, suddenly exposed, and I had to deal with this. I had to exist somehow on my own. It was like coming back to life. That's how I imaged it. Because that's how it felt. I had been living as a ghost. I had moved about the house, but I wasn't really there. I never had been. I was dead. I was acting out a part, day in, day out, but I wasn't there, not really. And of course, time went on, and I forgot who I was. The children grew, birthdays came and went. Every day, I would wake up, I would go through the list, and then I would sleep. Nightmare-filled sleep. I was suffocating. I was dead before I even realised I was dying. But then that's what we do, isn't it? Narcissists. That's how we kill.